Hi everybody, hope everybody's doing well. It's been a little while and probably long overdue, but wanted to do one last video of I guess my gear and kind of a gear review of what I used on the AT, and I know that No Filter is doing one as well, so we'll be posting up here shortly. But what I thought I would do is just kind of go through my pack, what was in the pack, and basically for what I did carry, there were two kind of seasons for it. When we first started in February, we definitely were in the winter season. We had lows in the low 20s. So a lot of things that we had were dealing with cold weather from a clothing and from a gear perspective. And then when we switched and did our flip in the South, we were much more into the summer gear. So there's some changes that were made with that. So I'm gonna try to go through both of those. And what I'll do is just kind of go through my pack and show you a little bit of, again, what's in it, how I packed it, and again, give you a feel of kind of my thoughts on some of the gear that I had. So first of all, the pack that I had used was the Osprey Atmos 65. And this is a pack I've had for quite a while, and it's done me pretty well. I think probably I've got maybe almost 4,000 miles on this thing. And I would say it's probably done its last hike. It's starting to wear out pretty good with some holes and so forth. But it did a great job on the trail. One of the things I really liked about it was that it was very comfortable for me, particularly when we were carrying some heavy weights in the wintertime. And I say heavy weights, usually, I think my base weight was somewhere around 24 pounds with all the winter gear. And then when you throw in the water and food, normally over about 4 or 5 days worth of food, I was in the 34, 35 pound range after resupply. So this carried that weight pretty comfortably for me. And as such, I really enjoy using it. So let me just start with what's on my pack on the outside. First of all is I had my Crocs, which were my camp shoes and what I used in a lot of cases when I did a lot of water crossings. And I will say they held up well. I had them a long time. You can kind of see I've had a lot of repairs on them throughout the trip, adding some things that broke off. Just to try to get them to make it through. But again, it worked out very well. You know, at times I questioned whether or not I needed to bring camp shoes. You know, this is about 11 ounces worth of shoe. But there's just something nice about getting to camp at night and you have something to put on. You can take off your boots and have these. And it also makes it nice in the middle of the night if you've got to get up and you just quickly throw your Crocs on. Anyways, it gives you a chance for your feet to air out and to feel a little bit of comfort. The other thing I had in my pack on the outside was my rain gear. So I had the Montville rain jacket, which really was a nice jacket. It really did me well. I never had any problems with it wading out. It has the pit zips, and I was able to really moderate a lot of my temperature as a result of that. It also was really good from a standpoint of just a wind protection. So on some of those days where it was just very breezy, particularly when you got up into the higher elevations and the wind was blowing, it worked out very well to try to keep myself warm from that perspective. The other thing that I had was my rain pants, and these were Montville's as well. And overall, these did pretty well. They certainly held up as it relates to not wetting out and so forth, but I really tore them up quite a bit. You can see here on the bottom where I've taped up a lot of things just to try to get them through. And I think probably I might be able to get a little bit more use out of them, but they certainly felt the wear and tear of the through hike. Now, another thing that I carried from a winter standpoint was my micro spikes. And it ended up that did not need these, but when No Filter and I had done some of our pre-hikes or shakedowns, we were walking in some snow and ice where we were able to use these, and they certainly made a difference for us. So we started out with these in the end of February, and we carried them for most of the trip until we, I don't know exactly where it was that we got rid of them. It was probably in the Pennsylvania-ish area. And then we actually had them sent back to us before we got into the whites, because some of the feedback we had gotten from individuals that there was a lot of snow and ice up in there, particularly on Mount Moosilauke. And so we brought them back. But it turns out we really didn't need them, but it certainly was nice to know that we had them if we needed it. Just in case. But we ultimately ended up sending them back. I think I sent mine back by the end of New Hampshire, and it certainly didn't carry them as we were going further into the south. So other things that were on my pack here, I would carry my poles. I use the Big Agnes Tiger Wall UL2 tent. So I have my poles on the outside of my tent. And with that, I'll go ahead and kind of show the bottom part. First off, I had my little sit pad, which was very handy, both from the standpoint of being able to put it down on the ground, and when you sat down, you didn't get wet or dirty or whatever when you're sitting, but also used it quite a bit for, just a clean area to place things. Sometimes when you're, whether it be cooking on the ground or something like that, it's nice to have something you can sit things on without everything getting dirty or wet. So with that, in the bottom of my pack underneath that is where I carried the other parts of my tent. And I kind of kept things separate. First of all, I just had my rain fly. And then I had, my footprint. And then I had my rain fly in a bag here on the bottom. And I kept things in the bottom, mainly the parts that would be wet. So if my tent got wet, particularly the rain fly would be soaked, footprint would usually be wet. And I keep them in the bottom of my pack and such, kind of away from everything else. And you'll see when I show it, I've got a Neoprene bag inside to keep everything dry. But this kind of let me just have one spot that I can put wet things and keep them separated from everything else. The other part of my tent actually is on the inside here, and I'll go ahead and pull that out now just to kind of get a complete look at that. And this was just the actual tent body itself, and I would keep this up in the upper part. Now, I didn't keep it in the dry bag, or the Neoprene bag that I have, but I kept it up top, mainly because I would keep this dry. I was able to keep it dry even on the rainy days. I could set my tent up and tear it down in a manner that I could keep the main body of the tent dry. So I would kind of keep this separate, because if I kept it next to the other stuff that's wet, it would just soak all that wetness into it. So I did that. Some other things that I have in my pack, in one of the zipper bags, I had, certainly in the winter months, I had my emergency blanket. I never actually needed to use it, but it's one of those just in case kind of things. In case both for myself or if I come across somebody else that needed them. So I did carry this for the first part of the trip, but I got rid of it when I went down south and did the southern part in the summertime. The other thing that I had in here was a roll of Leuco tape. Just kind of kept that separate. Used this quite a bit on my feet and on my hands, where I'd get problems with my hands cracking, or if I did have a cut or something and I was having a hard time keeping the Band-Aid on, I'd use a Leuco tape. I highly recommend this. It's great tape from the standpoint of just maintaining its stickability to you, and particularly on my feet. I would put these on the heels of my feet as a preventive measure, because in the past I'd always have problems with my heels getting blisters, but by putting this on, I was able to prevent that. Now, the only thing I did find is that having this on for the length of time that I did created some problems with my skin, where my skin just got really irritated with it. And so I had to get a little creative on how I would put it on, kind of shifting it around a little bit. But all in all, very worthwhile carrying the extra tape that I had. The other thing I had in the bottom here was my bear bag line and my rock bag. I certainly used this quite a bit. No Filter and I would most of the time be able to share it, whether I was tossing one or he was tossing one. But we had enough with what we had here that we could usually haul up both of our food bags even after the resupply. So this is important to have, and we did try very hard to make sure that we always took care of our food, whether it be via bear bag or bear box or bear cable or bear pole, whatever it may be, just to make sure that we were trying to do our part to keep the wildlife away from us. Then the other part I had in here was my, what I'll call a hygiene bag, and I'm going to go through that in a little bit later here. The other thing I had in here was I would carry a small piece of Tyvek-like material. And this was something else that I used from the standpoint of just having something clean that I could put on the ground, that I could set things on, particularly again, if I'm cooking or those type of things. And usually if I'm sitting on my butt pad, I'd have this out to where, again, I could have some clean spot where I'm not dealing with dirt and everything else while I'm trying to keep clean. The other thing was my water system. This is what I use to filter my water. It's a Sawyer filter. So I used the regular Sawyer filter. It had a very good flow. I actually replaced it once on the trail. The one I had started with, I already had quite a few outings on it. So probably about halfway, I went ahead and got another one, and it did a great job for me. And with that, I had the CNOC bag, which is a 2-liter bag that I would use for my dirty water. Fill this up. Again, the nice thing about the CNOC is that, one, the material is really good as far as holding up to any kind of pressure that you're putting on it. But then the other part is that the ability to quickly open it up and make it a wide mouth. That made it very easy to get water out of the sources. Now, in the few cases where it was difficult, you know, there wasn't a good stream going on, I had a little plastic cup, and this basically is the bottom of a water bottle. And I would just use this for a scoop if I needed to scoop water out or try to top off because I couldn't do it based on what the water flow looked like. And that came in extremely handy to have that. And then I just kept it all in a ditty bag just to kind of keep things contained and organized. And then being a ditty bag, it, you know, from a mesh standpoint, it would help kind of dry things out if necessary. All right. The other thing that I had in here was my first aid kit, and I won't pull all these out, but I basically had a few bandages, you know, a lot of the smaller bandages, a couple gauze bandages just in case. Had some ibuprofen, Benadryl, some Imodium, some Tums, and I think that was pretty much it. I didn't need it a lot. I did have, you know, at times I have some cuts and abrasions that required me to put a Band-Aid on, particularly if I'm going to bed at night and still have some, you know, sores that are bleeding or whatever. I would do that. I also had some antiseptic cream in here to help do that. I was very fortunate that I didn't have any major issues as it relates to that. I did do a really good job. If I did cut myself, I did a good job of trying to keep cream on it and try to make sure that it didn't have any problems with infections and so forth. But again, just this little case, I think it ended up weighing about maybe 4.5 ounces with everything in it. So again, it worked out very well for me. The other thing I kept on the outside pocket here was, I'll say, my gear repair bag. And in here I had some zip ties, had a little bit of duct tape in here, had a needle and thread, and I use that quite a bit. If you watch some of our videos, I spent the first part of it doing a lot of repairs on the pants that I had, because they were pants that I'd had from before and didn't realize that they were as worn as they were. So I ended up having to repair them quite a bit until I could get to, I think it was Waynesboro, where I ended up buying another pair of hiking pants. And even those pants, as I was going along, ended up having some tears and stuff in them that I spent a lot of time sewing. So also in here I had a tent pole stent. I had an extra gasket for my Sawyer. Had a couple of safety pins, some rubber bands. Again, just some basic stuff. But I found that it was good to have. I also used the zip ties that I had to fix some things, particularly with my gaiters I had at the time, had some issues. So this was something that was very worthwhile for me to carry. Let's see, what else I have in here. On the front of the pack on the outside, I had my water bottle I've carried here on my strap, and I had a little bottle carrier, a little clip here, that worked out very well. It's very easy to get on and off, and it held up very well throughout the trip. I also, in the later part of the trip, on the southern part, a friend of mine loaned me their water bottle, I don't know what you call it, a sack-like thing that I would put this in. And that actually worked out as well. I don't have that with me, but that actually worked as well. But this worked out very good. I had a bandana that I would use for, you know, trying to dry off the sweat, some hand sanitizer, and then I also carried a thermometer, or as I like to call it, my thermometer. And this would obviously tell me what the current temperature is, but more importantly, it would tell me what the max and min is. And this was kind of helpful at night. In the morning, I was always curious how low did the temperature get, and this would help me know what that is. Now on the little pockets that I have here, and this is one of the areas that the pack is starting to fall apart. These little side pockets are all ripped. I don't know if you could tell, but I've got tape all over them. But in here I would have my sunscreen and my bug spray. And then in the other pouch on the other side is where I would carry my headlamp. And my headlamp was the Petzl. I don't remember what the exact model was on this, but it's a rechargeable battery, and it works great for me. Never had any issues with running out of juice for my headlamp. So with that, let me go ahead and dive into what's inside the pack here. Or actually, before I do that, let me just show you a little bit of what was in my hygiene bag. And let's see, I had some body powder. Helped quite a bit as it relates to any kind of rash. But I also had some butt paste, and this was something that was pretty important, particularly when it started to sweat a lot. This really did a great job in keeping the chafing down. It has some wet wipes. This is probably a little bit more of a luxury in the sense that I would carry this had what, 20 wipes in it. But it sure was nice at the end of the day to be able to just wipe your face down. In some cases, kind of do a full body wash, just to kind of keep some sense of hygiene as you were going along. Obviously, I had a roll of toilet paper, had my deuce spade for digging my cat holes. One of the things I also carried was some dog bags that is what you would normally use if you were picking up after your pet. But I would use these in case, if I was in a privy or even when I was digging cat holes. The wipes don't disintegrate very well, and they ask that you don't put those in a privy. So I would end up packing those out, and I would use one of these to do that with. I also had a little bit of camp soap. This came in real handy with just washing your hands and occasionally doing dishes. Didn't do dishes a whole lot because usually we would be somewhere after a week to where I would wash everything up. But I had this that I use mainly for washing my hands. And then I had a little bit of Lotrimin that I would use both for my feet as well as at one point I started to get a little bit of jock itch, so I wanted to go ahead and use this for that. So anyways, that all worked out pretty well for me. Now, from a standpoint of the brain of my pack, first off, let me show you, and I'll show you some things I had for the winter. I had some really kind of heavy overall mittens for winter months. And this in addition to the regular gloves, which are in here. Yeah, maybe they're not in here. Yeah, there they are. Some regular glove liners, and I would wear these quite a bit. These I've only wore a few times, mainly when the weather was really cold outside. And over top of these really worked well. One of the things I'd say is my Achilles heel is having cold hands, and it's something that I really don't enjoy. So I had this 2 layers of gloves. Now the gloves went away particularly these, when the summertime when we kicked down into the southern part. It's one of the ways I was able to shed a little bit of weight with that. I did keep my gloves just because there were cold mornings and with the wind blowing or whatever, it was nice to have these just to be able to keep the hands warm. Also inside my brain, I had my little camp towel. Use this mainly just to dry things off, like after cooking or whatever, and I had some wet things I needed to dry off. I did that. Also to help me dry off, if I had washed my face or whatever, I could use this to dry. And it really dried pretty fast. So the other thing I kept up here was my toothpaste, toothbrush, and I had some nail clippers that I brought with me as well. Had my bug net, which you definitely need up in the New England states. Didn't need it too much down here in the south, which was kind of surprising. I thought for sure we'd have a lot more bugs down on the side, but definitely New England states won that award for the buggiest states. But the bug net really came in handy. Had a pair of cheap sunglasses. These are actually my $6 Lowe's safety glasses that I used quite a bit, particularly when I was above tree line. And I had my pack cover, which was a Z-Packs cover. And all in all, this worked okay. On one hand, I think it was a little bit small for my pack. The other thing is it didn't hold up well as far as any kind of abrasions. Ended up with a few cuts in it that I had to try to patch up. And then water always seemed to get into it to where you'd have water puddling in the bottom of it and have to try to empty it. So not sure it was worth, I think it was like 50 bucks for this. I'm not sure that was worth it, but certainly from a weight standpoint, the weight was pretty minimal. So that's pretty much it, what I had on the top of the brain. And then inside the brain, I had a little zipper compartment, which I really liked. And in here, I had all my electronics. I had an Anchor 10,000 battery pack. I had an Anchor plug-in wall charger. I had all the cables that I needed, which were mainly for my phone, one for my headlamp, which also I could use to charge my earphones. That's what I had. And then also I had a cable for my watch that I could charge that up. And so a little bit heavy, but it certainly all worked well. And the piece that I'm proudest of most is I didn't lose any cables throughout the whole trip. So that was pretty amazing. So that was it from a brain standpoint. And so let me go ahead and dive into the actual inside of the pack. On the top of the pack, outside of the Neoprene bag that I use to keep things dry, I would sit this on top because mainly it was waterproof. And this is my Z-Pack food bag. And within this, I would have obviously all the food that I had, which for the most part was 4 to 5 days. That was the usual amount. I can tell you that 5 days of food really, it puts this pretty tight, pretty full. Don't think I could carry much more than that. But in here, I would carry my little pouch, my thermal pouch that I would use for if I would cook and try to rehydrate something. Take a lot of my north sides that I did, or even some of the Mountain House, you would put your water in them and then set those down in here. And that this would insulate it to the point that it would heat up much faster and you wouldn't have to use as much fuel to do that. And inside here, it would also keep my spoon. A nice titanium spoon would go in there. A good way just to always know where it's at. And then the only other thing that I used in my food bag was I did have some OpSac odor-free bags. I had a big one and then I also had a smaller one. And I like these. The only challenge was when I was really in a full resupply, like 4 or 5 days, I couldn't get it all in this. And it really created a challenge with trying to get everything to settle right in the bag. So sometimes I would not use this, but then I would, once the food came down a little bit, I would go ahead and put it into this. I think on my part going into the south, I actually took that out completely, just because I was trying to save some weight and trying to save some space. But anyways, that was on my food bag. And then I would have, again, this Neoprene bag. I'll show it to you a little bit more when I get it emptied. But this is what I would use to make sure that everything stayed dry. Because even though you have a pack cover couldn't keep every single bit of water out. And this pack is not completely waterproof, so water would, seep in if I wasn't careful. So just to be on the safe side, I would have this with all the things I wanted to keep dry would be inside this Neoprene bag. One of the things that right handy for me was my fleece. I wore this quite a bit. Fleece, a very lightweight fleece, but this was really good both from a standpoint of at night and sleeping, where a puffy might be a little bit too much, it might get a little bit too warm in your bag. This would kind of help bridge that gap. Also, when I'm hiking in the mornings, again, a puffy just is way too hot, but if I was still a little bit cold, I would put this over my short sleeve shirt or the shirt that I had on. And then in some cases, I would put my rain jacket on top of this, and that would be a layering system that would get me to a certain level of warmth. So very valuable, very worthwhile in bringing. Next thing I had here was my puffy. And this is my cheap Costco puffy that I've had probably for about 3 or 4 years. Did a great job. I had one little cut in it, and I had the little tape up here, but did a great job in keeping me warm. Mainly used at night when I got to camp, put this on, or anytime we stopped and, at lunch or whatever it may be, and if the weather was chilly, then I'd go ahead and pull this out and put it on. Sometimes on the really cold nights, I would wear this in my bag, just to give me that extra bit of warmth. But again, did a great job for me. And then I had my cook system. I have a 750 liter Tokes pot. And I also, on the bottom of it, I had my old jet boil cup, which worked really good until I accidentally put it on the fire. So I spent, I think this happened, probably about midway. So I spent a lot of time with duct tape and glue trying to get it to work. And it did a good job, although right toward the end of the trip, it started leaking again. So I may have to put this on the shelf in my museum of things that remind me of the trip. But anyways, inside here I had this Acticity stove, which worked great for me. It never had any problems. The only problem I'd say I have with this is the igniter didn't really work. It would spark, but it didn't consistently light the fire. But this thing did great. It's $14 on Amazon, and I certainly have enjoyed and got my money's worth out of it. And I think it's got a lot more miles and trips left in it. And I had my little lighter just to help light that. I had a little scrubby pad just to help, scrub the pot if I cooked inside the pot. And then I'd also keep my small 110 G fuel in here. And again, all of this kind of nestled in here very nicely, which made it very nice to just put back and be able to easily store it all together. And again, put it back in the pack in a way that you know where everything's at. So. All right, I'm running out of room on the table here, but the other thing I had was my clothes, and I will go through those in just a little bit. Now, when I started out, this is my sleeping pad. I had the I had the Thermarest Xtherm, which has like a 6.9 R rating. So when things were cold, this thing did a super job. I was really impressed with this. I didn't have any issues at all, no leaks, nothing, very comfortable. Weighs a little bit heavier than I would have liked. I think maybe around 20 ounces, something like that. But it was perfect for the winter time, and I definitely will use this, continue to use this from a cold weather perspective. Now I will say that one of the things I did switch out when I came to the south in the summertime is I went with the Thermarest Uberlight. And this was, not as good from an R value standpoint, but much lighter. I think it was maybe 12 ounces, say about 8 ounces with it. Worked great for me, didn't have any problems, easy to blow up, easy to deflate. So this was, again, something that I used only come summertime and I swapped out. So in the bottom of this bag, and so I'll pull this bag out. This is, again, just kind of like a garbage bag, but it's very thin. I think it weighs about maybe an ounce. I went through a couple of these because eventually, they do wear out with all the wear and tear and push and pull that you have on them. But it worked extremely well. So I had everything inside of this that I wanted to keep dry. And then in the winter months, I had this compression bag, and this is my sleeping bag and some other items that are in here. And I had the compression bag just because I had so much stuff that I wanted to try to just keep it as tight as I could and, be able to try to keep the space requirements down to a minimum within my pack. And let me just open this up. And inside of this, first off, I had a pillow. I decided to go ahead and bring a pillow. This is the Sea to Summit pillow. And it worked extremely well. The nice thing about this is you could always count on the consistency of the pillow. You could let air in, add more air to it if you want. But I never had to worry about, did I have enough clothes, my clothes bag or something else to be able to maintain a pillow. In the wintertime, your clothes bag, for the most part, you could probably do pretty good with using as a pillow, depending on how cold the night is, how much stuff you take out of it. But in the summertime, I didn't have much in my actual clothes bag. So this was very, very nice to have, again, just to maintain some consistency with it. And then in the wintertime, one of the things another great purchase was my down booties. I really like these things. They kept my feet extremely warm. I didn't walk around them. There's no soles on them, but I would use these in my bag or in my tent. And if I had to get out to go use the restroom, I'd pop them off real quick, put my Crocs on and go do what I needed to, then come back, put these back on. But these were very good, very warm, and again, a very worthwhile purchase. I had a bag liner, and I use this for two reasons. One, certainly from a cold perspective, but probably also more importantly, is trying to keep my bag somewhat clean where it wasn't, getting all the sweat and everything else into it. Also, from a summertime standpoint, this was nice. It gave, and particularly in the shoulder weather where the temperatures were changing, it gave me some alternatives that I could, in some cases, just sleep in this. And actually, come summertime, I actually swapped off to a different bag liner, which is almost more like a sheet. Because a lot of times, this is all I would have on me, was the sheet to sleep in, and it kept me warm enough from a warm weather standpoint. But anyway, so this was in with my sleeping bag. And then my last thing was my sleeping bag itself. And I won't pull this all the way out, but it's a REI Extreme, I think it's a 22 comfort rating. And it did me extremely well, particularly with all the other things that I have options for. Again, I could have wore my puffy, have my down booties. I'll show you what clothes I had with some long johns and stuff. Now, come summertime, I still carry this only because I really didn't have a good summer bag and I didn't really feel like going out and spending a lot of money for one. So I would still use this, but use it more in a quilt manner, kind of almost like a covering over top of me that I would use sometimes. But again, a lot of times I was able to just use this bag liner to sleep in and then maybe cover myself a little bit if the temperatures changed. So the other thing I did is come the summertime when I was not carrying as much stuff in there, I switched to just a regular Sea to Summit bag, waterproof bag, and I got rid of the compression sack. Saved a little bit of weight with that, and again, I didn't have as much stuff in here that I was trying to jam into it, so I wasn't as concerned about some of the space aspects of things. So, all right, I think that's pretty much it with what was in there. Let me talk about a couple other items here. One is looking at what was in my bag for clothes. And before I do that, one of the things I meant to do in the very beginning was just to show you what I wore just every day. I had some Exficio underwear that I would wear. I had my Philmont Scout shirt, which I really enjoyed, a quick dry shirt. I had my Darn Tough and an Ninja toe socks that I would wear. And then I went through, this is the third pair of pants that I had. And this actually is an old, I think an old Boy Scout one. These have zip off on them, which I really like because, again, a lot of times if things got warm, I could just zip off the bottom of the pants. And I'd have shorts. Things got cold, or, you know, in the South, even when things were hot and the leaves, or excuse me, the tree was just, the trail was just full from a standpoint of overgrowth. I would sometimes put the long pants on just to try to avoid getting all scratched up. And poison ivy and those type of things. So that worked extremely well. But that's what I would wear for the most part every day. And then in my in my clothes bag, I carried one extra pair of socks, or I should say one extra pair of Darn Tough socks. I had, in the winter months, I had a pair of Long John bottoms, and I had a wool cap that I carried with me. I actually carried this in the summertime as well, just because of some of the cool nights that were going on. And then I had an extra pair of Exficio underwear. I had a top to my Long Johns, and I would wear this sometimes hiking. Again, just different layering, you know, that was available to me. I would wear this and maybe just by itself, or I could throw my short sleeve underneath it, then this, and then my fleece jacket if I needed to. Again, it gave me a lot of options to try to keep me different temperatures. I had a Smartwool 250 shirt, and I mainly wore this at night. I didn't hike too much in this. In fact, I don't think I ever did hike in this. It was mainly just in the evenings when I get to camp and I'm trying to go put on dry clothes. This is what I would wear in the winter time. I had a pair of what I call camp pants. And this was just kind of some warm-up type pants that I've just had for a long time. Probably a little bit heavier than I would like to have, but they've just always been a good thing for me. Again, another one of those at the end of the day, I can just throw these on, take off any damp clothes that I've got, put those on, and they keep me pretty warm throughout the night. I also had some rain socks, and these were, I learned about these in our last shakedown hike before the hike. And we were hiking through snow and so forth, and these work great. The shoes that I've got, which are the Obos, they're not waterproof. And so these were extremely helpful in keeping the feet dry. And I really didn't have any problems with the feet sweating, particularly in the cold months. I used them a few times in the summer months, but not a lot, only because, you know, your feet were pretty warm, so even if they got wet, it usually wasn't too much of a problem. Whereas in the cold, I wanted to try hard to keep my feet, you know, from getting all damp and cold and frozen. So I would use these. I went through actually a couple pairs of these where they would just wear out after wearing them so much. But these were a very nice addition to my clothes. And then let's see what else I got in here. I had a baklava. That's what I use mainly at night when I was sleeping. I think I may have hiked in this a couple times with it when it's really cold and windy. This was a nice touch for it. And then I also had an extra short sleeve shirt. I only had this in the summertime. Usually I only had the one short sleeve in the winter months, and my other stuff I have at night. And then in the summer months, all I had was this. I didn't have any of my long sleeve or long john type things. So, and then the one thing I don't have in here is my buff that I had, which was, again, just a neck gaiter. And that was very helpful, again, just to try to bridge that gap. I didn't really need the baklava when it was hot, but I did need the gaiter just on some of the cool months. And also with some of the mask requirements that we got into, I was able to quickly use it as a mask. So that's what my clothes look like. Again, overall, pretty happy with everything. I'd say everything held up pretty well. I think, you know, my rain pants probably took the biggest beating. My pack, I'm not sure it's going to make any more trips with me. But everything else I had did pretty well. I went through about 4 pairs of shoes. I was using the Obo's Sawtooth shoes and really loved them. They did well for me, but I'd get about 500 miles out of them and the front of them would start to fall apart. So I ended up going through about 5 pairs of those, but roughly about every 500 miles I'd be changing them out. So So that's pretty much it. You can see my pile of stuff here. Again, you know, weight-wise, definitely was not ultralight. I had a lot of things that I would put in the category of just some comforts and things that I like, but it made the trip very pleasurable, and I enjoyed that. And one of the things I think was very important, you know, as I unpacked my pack, one of the things I tried hard to do was to try to make sure that I had everything in a certain spot. And I think you've heard that saying, a place for everything and everything in its place. It really means a lot when you're backpacking. One, from a standpoint is, you know, if it's dark or whatever, you don't have to figure out where something is. You know where you've put it. The other thing is just trying to keep up with everything. If you're always putting it back in the same spot, then you don't have to worry about, oh, did I lose it, or do I have it, or should I look for it? It was a real good habit for me, and I think that's probably something that's very helpful for a lot of people. So anyways, there you have it. If you have any questions, comments, certainly leave those in the comment field for us. And I appreciate y'all following along. Take care.